What's going on, movie fans? Welcome to episode 11 of the Real Takes podcast here on WSVC Radio. I'm your host, Dan Sisk. We have a couple movies to talk about this week. First off, I know what I said last week about only reviewing the awards contenders that I had yet to watch, but I actually did end up watching the new Hard Eyes in theaters this weekend. I wasn't really excited for it, but I actually have a lot to say about the movie, so I'm excited to talk about that. But then I'm also going to honor the promise that I made last week, so I'm going to review The Brutalist, and I'm also going to review Nickel Boys. So those are the three movies we've got. So let's just dive on in immediately to the new release, and that is Hard Eyes. So this is a new rom-com slasher movie from the director Josh Rubin is his name. He comes from College Humor. A lot of people probably in the early 2010s watched a lot of College Humor. It's not as popular these days. I think they changed the name to Dropout, and it's not as popular. But for a while there, College Humor was really, really funny. And so he has that background. This is written and produced by Christopher Landon, who is relatively well known in the horror space. He worked on the Paranormal Activity franchise for a long time. He did the Happy Death Day movies, both of them, which I thought were solid. They were decent. And then he also did Freaky, which was basically a Scream Freaky Friday hybrid, which I thought was absolutely horrible, but some people enjoyed it. This movie stars Olivia Holt, who I believe comes from Disney Channel. Let me check. Yes, she did. She was in Kickin' It, if any of you grew up on that show. I did not. And this also stars Mason Gooding from the new Scream movies, Devon Sawa from Final Destination, and then Jordana Brewster from The Faculty. So we have a lot of horror royalty that was hired to star in this movie. So the basic setup is that there's a serial killer known as Hard Eyes, and every year on Valentine's Day, he kills multiple couples in a random city. And this year, he decides to go to Seattle, where one of his new targets is a group of pitch designers, one played by Olivia Holt, one played by Mason Gooding, who actually aren't a couple, but Hard Eyes mistakenly believes that they are, and over the course of the movie, they actually fall in love and become a couple. So as I said last week when I vehemently refused to review this movie, I thought the trailer for this was awful. I thought it looked unpleasant. I thought it looked bland. I thought it looked uninspired. I couldn't have been more negative towards the trailer, if I'm being perfectly honest. I thought it looked like a direct-to-streaming movie. And then it got all these great reviews, and my pride said, you know what, I'm going to stick by my guns and I'm not going to see this movie in theaters, but I'll probably check it out on digital. But then a couple of my family members on Saturday night when I was visiting home were like, hey, Sunday afternoon we're going to go see this. Do you want to tag along? I was like, okay, why not? I might as well. I was shocked how much I enjoyed this movie. This movie is so much fun. It's definitely taking a lot from Scream, but I would argue that the comedy in this is excellent. You can tell that the director came from College Humor because the comedy and the timing of the comedy really, really works. For all of the Scream ripoffs we get these days, and Christopher Landon has made a career for himself ripping off Scream. I mean, that's what Happy Death Day is. That's what Freaky is. The man, that's what he does. He rips off Scream. Of all the Scream knockoffs, not only would I say this is the best, but I would also argue that this is the funniest Scream movie since the original Scream. I think the humor here is better than any of the Scream sequels. I was laughing quite a bit throughout the entire tight 95-minute runtime, very short movie. Please, let's get back to the 90-minute movie. Where, I've been watching a lot of very short movies in recent weeks, and it's been wonderful. Presence was 90 minutes. Companion was like an hour 40, but close enough. I'm all for the 90-minute movie. More show times. It's easier to digest. Let's get in and out. Hard Eyes, I'll tell you this. These 90 minutes, even though it's a short runtime, it flew by. Did not feel the runtime at all. I had a great time watching this. The acting's fine. The acting is nothing that's super impressive. But Holt and Gooding sell the romance. And I actually really liked Gooding's comedic timing here because, as anyone who watches the Scream movies knows, he plays one set of twins. He plays one of the two twins. The other twin is played by Jasmine Savoy Brown from Yellow Jackets. And in those movies, Jasmine Savoy Brown is the basically the Randy equivalent, and she's the character who gets a lot of the humor. Gets a lot of the jokes written for her. So Mason Gooding normally doesn't get a lot of opportunities to be funny in the Scream movies, but he's given a lot of opportunities to be funny here, and he is hilarious. He's really, really talented. I'm actually very intrigued to see where Mason Gooding goes from here, because I think he's building up a really solid resume of horror comedies, and we'll see if he can springboard it into a juicy role later on. The story is disgustingly predictable. They telegraph everything from 2 miles away. If you've watched a lot of movies, you'll know exactly who at least one of the killers is immediately. They don't hide it. But overall, for me, normally that would be the death knell. That's actually one of my big complaints about the slasher genre. I'm not a big slasher fan, largely because they're just so formulaic. But this one intentionally makes fun of the formula of slashers, and it intentionally makes fun of the formula of rom-coms, and the humor works so well that I was actually able to look past the predictability, and I ended up really enjoying the movie. So, again, I am shocked at how positive I am on this movie, because I stand by it. I meant it last week when I said I was not planning on reviewing Hard Eyes. But I was incredibly impressed with this movie. It's not going to be one of the best movies of the year. It's not on the level of Presence for me, but it is better than Companion. I did enjoy it more than Companion. So, yeah, really fun time. If you're into... I think there's something here for everyone. It's very gory, so I don't know how exactly you're going to get a lot of non-horror fans and rom-com fans exclusively. I don't know how many of them you're gonna get, because the movie does get extremely gory. There's one kill with the great press that's very over the top. I mean, very entertaining for gore and horror fans like myself, but for rom-com fans, they're gonna be mortified and probably vomit in the theater. But yeah, I hope that this finds an audience. The opening weekend box office for Hard Eyes was very poor, largely because it came out Super Bowl weekend, and Super Bowl weekend is historically known as being one of the worst weekends for moviegoing. So, there weren't, huge expectations on Hard Eyes, but I think it only made like $8-9 million. It's obviously intended to play through the week leading up to Valentine's Day, and I think a lot of people will see the reviews and pick that movie as their Valentine's Day date night movie. I think it's a really fun date night movie, and I think there's something to enjoy for everyone. Just be warned that for the more squeamish people, cover your eyes, because there are definitely some very gory and bloody moments peppered throughout. But yeah, really solid horror movie. Another really good horror movie. That's 3 rock solid and or great horror films, and we are a week and a half into February. I mean, that's pretty impressive, and I can't wait to see what the genre continues to give us. I mean, we obviously have Sinners, we have 28 Years Later, Megan 2. There's going to be some interesting and exciting ones coming up as the months go by. So, but that's another conversation for another time. So yeah, Hard Eyes, recommend it. Maybe you don't need to see it in theaters, but if you want to go to the movies for date night, that Hard Eyes is your pick. Can't recommend it for that enough. Okay, so we're going to be moving on to the Brutalist, and you know how I was just praising that there are recent movies that are only 90 minutes long? Well, this movie is 3.5 hours long, and it has a 15-minute intermission. So this runs in the complete opposite direction of that sentiment. This is a big awards contender. This is currently nominated for 10 Oscars at the Academy Awards. This is nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actress, and Best Supporting Actor, just to name a couple of them. Those are all the above-the-line nominations. There are also some below-the-line nominations like Score and Cinematography. But this is a period drama about a Holocaust survivor who immigrates to the U.S. Adrian Brody plays that Holocaust survivor, and he attempts to achieve the American dream. And he is a brilliant... he's basically, I guess, how do I want to call this? He's pretty much a brilliant brilliant archaeologist, and he's a brilliant architect as well. And they kind of hint at the archaeology just a little bit. I expected them to dive into that more, but they focus on the fact that he's a very accomplished architect in Europe, and he is hired to build a massive structure in Pennsylvania. This is written and directed by Brady Corbet, this is his third effort. He previously directed The Childhood of a Leader and Vox Lux, which came out a couple years ago with Natalie Portman and Jude Law. This, in addition to Adrian Brody, this stars Felicity Jones, Guy Pearce, Joe Alwyn, and Alessandra Nivola. So, very accomplished cast there. So, I watched Brady Corbet's first two movies about 2 months ago in preparation for The Brutalist, because I had read all of these incredible reviews coming out of the Venice Film Festival, where this premiered back in September, and The Brutalist immediately piqued my interest as something that I would probably enjoy. So I went back to watch Brady Corbet's first two movies, and I thought they sucked. Both Childhood of a Leader actually got very good reviews, but I thought that movie was a snooze fest. And then Vox Lux with Natalie Portman might be one of the worst movies I've seen in recent years. I thought that when it worked, it was surprisingly compelling, but I thought there were stretches of Vox Lux that were pretty bad, including an ending, which is anemic. It's just an absolutely atrocious ending. So I was not very high on Brady Corbet's first two movies. So after watching those, I kind of found it hard to believe that a man could go from those two to The Brutalist, which was getting all this praise. Again, out of Venice, he won the Golden Lion at Venice, which is basically the Best Director award. So I walked into this movie, excited. I was very much anticipating the movie, but I was still in the back of my mind finding it hard to believe that the man who made Childhood of a Leader and Vox Lux could jump to this. However, this movie's great. It's not one of the absolute best of the year, but it's really, really good. And for a 3.5-hour movie, it is shockingly well paced. Honestly, the second half, I felt like we skipped 20, 30 minutes. I would have preferred the movie to be even longer, because I felt that we were kind of running fast forward through the back half of the movie. I suspect there's like a 4.5-hour director's cut of this movie floating around in an A24 server, and maybe we'll get to see it one day, maybe we won't. The intermission was a really interesting experience. There's this beautiful black and white photo that comes on screen that kind of plays into the themes of the film, so I don't want to give away what the photo is. But it's a 15-minute intermission. I got to go get up, get a snack, go to the bathroom. I mean, it was really nice, and we got to. I went with my dad, and what was great about the intermission was that we really got to dissect the first half and kind of soak it in and kind of figure out what Brady Corbet was doing with it. So I'm actually all in favor for more intermissions. I think intermissions are really fun, and I would love to go to the movies and experience a couple more intermissions. The acting here is immaculate. Adrian Brody is absolutely phenomenal in this film. He got his start early on with The Pianist. Roman Polanski's The Pianist, and then he kind of went away. He pops up in a lot of Wes Anderson movies, but outside of that, he just kind of hovers in and out of Hollywood. So the fact that he got this role and does such a good job with it is incredibly impressive. I thought he was astonishing. Guy Pearce is the wealthy millionaire who hires him to build this public center, and Guy Pearce is very, very good. He has one monologue right before the intermission where he sits down with Laszlo, which is Adrian Brody's character, and he basically tells the story of his family and how they went up in the world. I was watching it and I was like, there's your Oscar speech. I mean, it was very well acted. Guy Pearce, Memento. The man's had a very, very respectable career. Felicity Jones. I was very surprised going into this movie that she was getting a lot of praise, because I mean, I like Felicity Jones. Rogue One, she was obviously the lead character there. I thought she did a nice job. The Theory of Everything, I thought she was really solid. Obviously nowhere as good as Eddie Redmayne, but I thought she was solid in that movie. I never saw her Ruth Bader Ginsburg biopic, but I think she's decently talented, but I never viewed her as like this Oscar caliber actress. And I continued to be very puzzled by the Best Supporting Actress buzz she got, because she's not in the first half of the movie. She only comes in at the very beginning of the second half of the film. So I was expecting her to really blow me away. And while I wouldn't say she blew me away, I did think she did a really nice job. I don't know if I fully agree with the fact that she needs a Best Supporting Actress nom, to be honest with you, but I thought she was very, very good. And then the other supporting actors like Joe Alwyn, Alessandro Nivola, they go in and out of the movie when they're needed, and they help fill the world of The Brutalist out. This is a very, very dark movie. It goes to some really twisted and messed up places, some of which work, some of which don't. You know, the ones that don't work, I at least can respect from the perspective of, you know, I could understand where Brady Corbet was going with some of these things, but I didn't need to see some graphic sexual violence in this film, and this movie goes there. And again, I can see thematically what Corbet was going for, but it wasn't necessary. So stuff like that, I think, could have been fine-toothed and sanded a little better. But overall, this is an immaculately directed movie. Brady Corbet's direction of his actors and his camera is astonishing. And right now, Sean Baker just won the Directors Guild Award, and Honora just won the PGA, the Producers Guild Award. So right now, Sean Baker is probably going to win Director, and he's probably going to win Picture. Honora's probably going to win Best Picture at the Oscars, because a lot of those voting bodies are also Academy voters. So Brady Corbet is probably not going to win Best Director, but he honestly deserves it, because his work in this movie is incredible. It is so, so good. And I feel bad that he's not going to win, because I think it's the best direction I've seen this year. Adrien Brody is going to win the Oscar unless Timothée Chalamet makes a last-minute surge, and Adrien Brody deserves it. He does an incredible job. The screenplay is, again, it could have taken some additional finesse, but overall, it works. And there are some scenes, especially in the first half, that are absolutely remarkable, and just incredibly gripping and engaging drama. The movie, I guess the best praise that I can give is that this movie is able to go to some really dark places, but also acknowledges that the American dream is possible. And I think, you know, a lot of people aren't going to agree with that takeaway, because I think this movie, the characters go through some dark places, and I think one of the, I guess, kind of spinning out of that comment, I think one of the points of this movie that is very strongly made is that it's not about the journey. It is about the destination. You need to end up in a happy place. And I think that that's something that this movie makes a really compelling argument. You know, you can have a great time going along the journey, but if you end up in a bad place, then what was the journey for? You just wasted time. Whereas this movie makes the point of, nope, you're going to go through some hardships and you're going to go through some rough points. But in the end, the destination is worth it. And whether or not that involves America, no spoilers, is kind of irrelevant and superfluous. And I found that to be very compelling. Also, some very interesting stuff regarding depression and how Laszlo's depression with regards to surviving the Holocaust kind of seeps into his work. I mean, this movie has so many layers, and the screenplay is incredibly dense, and Corbet makes all of it work, and the actors make it work, and the visuals make it work. I'm blown away with this movie. I really enjoyed it, and I think that it's not going to be in theaters for much longer. But if you get a chance, this is an A24 release, so eventually it's going to go to Max because A24 is a streaming deal with Max. That's where it's going to end up. If it ends up on Max, I highly, highly, highly recommend you watch it. You're probably going to have to split it into 2 movie nights. Movie night number 1 will be the first half. Movie night number 2 will be the second. But whatever you do, please watch this because I think you don't get artistry in this way very often. And I think this is really exciting for the future of movie making. I would like more intermissions, more theatrical intermissions. I thought it was really fun. So for the future of movies, please watch this when it hits digital because it really is worth your time. Lastly, okay, we're going to move on to the last movie. So this is Nickel Boys. This is the last Best Picture winner that I had yet to watch. And I watched it I believe I watched this on Wednesday. Yes. No, I'm sorry. I watched this Tuesday night. So this is a really odd movie. This is shot from a first-person point of view. And this is a period drama set in 1960s Florida. And it follows 2 African-American kids, and they're sent to an abusive reform school. And it's really kind of mirroring. It's not as much about racial tension as I expected, but it's definitely about, tension of youth and the negatives that come with abusive power. This is a really hard movie to talk about because it's hard to really discuss it without divulging spoilers. I will say this. The ending shocked me. I did not see the ending of this movie coming. I thought it was very abstract, more so than the rest of the movie. And it was very in your face, but it worked. It was very heartfelt. This is one of the most experimental movies I've seen in a long time, and it's a very abstract movie. And I am shocked, absolutely shocked, that this got nominated for Best Picture, because normally the Academy does not spark to these kinds of experimental efforts. But it's very compelling, and when it works, oh man, is it powerful. My issue with this was that it was only at max potential about 20% of the time. And the other 80% isn't bad, but it's not super powerful. And I felt that was a real problem for this movie. It's got really compelling themes. It has a pretty good cast. The 2 lead actors are unknowns. But you also have Ingenue Ellis, you have Hamish Linklater, you have Fred Hechinger, you have Daveed Diggs as supporting characters. I'm not going to tell you anything about who they're playing because, particularly Daveed Diggs, that's one of the great surprises that the movie has. Yeah, it's a really hard movie to talk about. I would say that if you are an adventurous moviegoer, you should check it out. It's not particularly preachy. It's a little dark. Like I said, the main focus of the movie isn't racial tension, but the racial tension is absolutely there. I mean, it's set in the 1960s South. It has to include that, right? But those elements were the most compelling to me, and again, they weren't the focus of the movie, so maybe that's what helped sand over the rough edges for me. Whenever that can become the focus of a film, I feel like I'm getting preached to a lot of the time. I didn't feel like this movie was preaching to me. I just felt that this movie was trying something radically different, and I respect it for that effort. But overall, it's a bizarre movie. But again, very experimental, very abstract. It's really all I can say. Because again, a large portion of this movie is the spoilers. I know that's crazy to say for a movie about a 1960s reform school, but it's the truth. This movie is very, very out there, and it's trying new things. And if you're an adventurous moviegoer, I recommend it. So definitely, in terms of the Best Picture winners I've seen, it's going to go low on my, in terms of the movies that were my favorites. I've seen a lot of people call this a masterpiece. I wouldn't call it that, but it was definitely something that I appreciated watching. As we get closer to the Oscars, which are first weekend of March, I believe. Before that, for that episode, I will rank the Oscar nominees that I have seen. I've seen 7 of the 10 Best Picture nominees, and I will be predicting which films will win which Oscars. So that'll be a fun little apropos to that episode of the show. But we're a couple weeks out, so I'm not going to go. I'll kind of explain more about Nickel Boys when I do that episode of the Real Takes. But right now, I think this movie's about to come on digital. I believe, let me check. It was distributed by Amazon MGM, which means it's going to come to Prime Video eventually. You should give it a chance. The first-person POV is really interesting to watch. It's far from the first movie to do first-person POV. But the way that it really imbues the emotion is very unique. And again, very abstract and very experimental. In addition to that very glaring cinematography choice. So, yeah, interesting flick. I don't know if you need to see it, if I'm being honest with you. Not the way you need to see The Brutalist. But if you're an experimental moviegoer, you should check it out. So that's it for this episode of The Real Takes. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, Hard Eyes, you should check it out. Brutalist, you really should check out. Nickel Boys, you can take it or leave it, but it's an interesting watch. When it comes to next week, we have Captain America Brave New World. Finally, we have a superhero movie to talk about. The last time I talked about superhero movies, I was ranting about Kraven the Hunter. So hopefully this one is not as bad as Kraven the Hunter. I've actually enjoyed the trailers for this. So I'm hopeful that it's going to be a really solid 3 out of 5. I hope it's going to be a nice old, pretty good time. So that'll be the big movie I talk about next week. I will also be reviewing The Gorge. It's a new movie that's coming out on Apple TV+. It's from Scott Derrickson, who directed the first Doctor Strange movie. He directed The Black Phone a couple years ago, which I really enjoyed, and he also directed Sinister from 2012, I believe. So he has a really, really respectable resume in the horror genre. But the problem with The Gorge is I'm being dead serious when I say this, it's being marketed as an apocalyptic action romance horror. And it sounds, and
Hey there, listeners. I'm Matt Boyer, station manager of WSVC Radio. If you like what you're listening to, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell button to be notified with all of our updates. Every day, one of our shows will be releasing a new episode. Stick around and tune in.